it was that when we deal with aliens, we often make them like us in some way. Maybe they want to eat us, or maybe they want our water, our resources, or they want to teach us about galactic federations or whatever it happens to be. But these are all sort of human concerns, and it seems like a legitimate thing to say that an alien might not be like us in any way at all. And we are motivated by things, and we have agendas, and an alien might not have an agenda or might not be motivated. And so it was an attempt to create an alien. In a literal way, the story starts in suburbia and ends in psychedelia. And it was a sort of shorthand on the film. It's the way we used to talk about it to each other. And it had a purpose to it as well, because if what you want to do is end in a place that is strange, that is truly strange, the means by which you get there become very important. And if you start something strange, so not in suburbia, which let's take suburbia as representing not strange, although of course it is.
That's a reach, but
sure.
Yeah.
What you find is that strangeness has a diminishing return. We're sort of proximity-based creatures, and we get acclimatized to a state quite quickly. And so by the end of the film, what was strange is no longer strange. It's just the landscape in which you exist. And so it felt like it needed to be a progression from something. Was that reading it was a dreamlike experience, and I wasn't sure, effectively in an adaptation like Never Let Me Go, I could kind of cut and paste narrative, right? And I couldn't do that in Annihilation. It was the experience of reading the book that felt most relevant. So I did something slightly odd with the permission of the writer. That's what I thought I had at any rate. I hope I did. Which was to do it was an adaptation which was a memory of the book. So instead of going back and rereading it and underlining passages, I did an adaptation from my experience of having read it without going back to the book. And what that means is that sometimes the film correlates very closely and sometimes it doesn't. So it really has a function of memory. And I thought that was a way to be faithful to the thing that I experienced most strongly, which was its dreamlike nature. I thought reading this book is like a dream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adapt it like a dream. I'm not going to reread the book. I'm going to adapt it from my memory of the book. And in a way, that was what Jeff gave me permission to do. So in some places, it will correlate very closely. In other places, it won't.
Could you tap into that feeling that you got from the book versus just how...
It's a dream response to a dream book,
right? Kind of.
And it's an interesting thing as well, because then it becomes about the nature of memory, I think, to an extent as well. Years and years ago, I was watching some TV show and there was a cop talking about eyewitnesses, and he said eyewitnesses are useless. Like, forget about, everyone thinks an eyewitness is the best thing you can have in solving a crime, but it's like the worst. And what you need is empirical evidence, fingerprints and DNA and stuff like that. And he was saying someone runs into a restaurant and there's a violent crime and someone's killed, and one eyewitness will say he had a gun, shot 5 times, another one will say shot once, another one will say there wasn't a gun, it was a knife. And you can't really rely on memory. And actually in my life, I've often observed that's true. So it was sort of making that application of that thing about subjectivity, I suppose, to this story. It's not really science. It has an agenda, which is really about self-destruction, I would say.
It's the title, yeah.
Clues in the name, yeah. It's more sort of metaphysical than science, I'd say. There is science in there to kind of ground it. There was a principle, this might sound strange, but if you think of a dream, if I'm saying that what this film is dream-like, dreams feel grounded in some strange kind of way. So now this is a dream, and to my right there's a grand piano, and a couple of moments later it's a polar bear. And you don't, within the dream, say, why is the grand piano now a polar bear? It's actually part of the dream logic, and it's part of the dream you're having, and it all makes sense. And so it felt important that the film had that strange sense of grounding in it. But it's also like not free for all, but free form. It has that quality as well. So it was a sort of mixture of the two. I wouldn't really take the science too explicitly in some respects, although it's there.
That themic heart of Annihilation, it's a film about self-destruction. And self-destruction could include psychological self-destruction, self-destruction via behavior, human behavior. But it could also include cancer, because cancer is one's own body attacking itself effectively. And it might be caused by something external like smoking, but in the end it's a tumor of one's own cells that is causing the problem. So anything that fitted into self-destruction worked themically, I suppose. It's also got something else, which is that not all self-destruction is quote unquote bad. I think one could say reasonably that certain kinds of self-destructive behavior are bad and cancer is bad, but the life cycle of a cell, which is happening the whole time within our bodies, is not bad. It's part of the restructuring of the body and the keeping alive of the body. And so this film tried to look in a holistic way at self-destruction. And you discover very strange bits of meaningless self-destructive behavior. And it was the meaninglessness of the self-destructive behavior that I found interesting. And people are, even the sort of supernaturally prepossessed person is sort of dismantling their job, or they're dismantling a friendship, or they're dismantling their marriage. And so that became the kind of fixation that was overlaid onto this film. It is basically a film about self-destruction, and it has a kind of thesis within it about why we do that, and the various forms in which it takes, I suppose. The reason the film is about self-destruction was because at a certain point, I think I just noticed that whenever I got to know somebody really well, certainly including myself, I would find they had self-destructive aspects to their character. And that's quite an interesting thing. If self-destructive impulses are universal, that's odd. We don't act like they're universal. And some people kind of offer up their self-destructive impulses to you. They make them very easy to see. And other people hide them brilliantly, and you meet them and you think, gosh, you're really together, you're very impressive, and your life is really very sort of well ordered, and you seem to have figured everything out. And then you get to know them better, and as time goes by, you start to see, oh, there's that going on. And that's not to make all self-destructive impulses equivalent. Some are wildly more extreme, and some are there, but they're quite benign. But just the fact that they're there in itself is quite interesting. So that was the starting point thematically of what the film was about. It's why people take something good that they have and then just start breaking it to bits. Why?
He described it as, that he didn't want to be playing the metaphor all the time of it, but that it essentially was each of us sort of going into our own selves, that this whole expedition is sort of investigating and confronting our own self-destruction.
It starts with a thesis. It'll be some particular thing that I've started to get obsessed with.
and I'm thinking about it in a repetitive, compulsive way. It's not really an intellectual process, it's a compulsive process. And in the case of Annihilation, it was self-destruction and the odd qualities of self-destruction and the odd places in which you find it. And in the thing I'm working on at the moment, it was a principle called determinism, a sort of product of living in a physical universe of cause and effect, and some of the implications of that to do with free will and what potentially one could predict of actions and that kind of thing. And so I get interested in that. I start to read about it. I start to obsess. And then at some point, not intentionally, a narrative arrives that inevitably is dovetailed to the thing I'm obsessed about at that moment. And it's another reason why I don't work on sequels, because I want to be interested in something else. And I will be interested in something else because I've got a limited capacity to know much about anything, right, at a certain point. So I feel, okay, I've learned this up to my ability, or I've explored it up to my ability. What's next, kind of? And it's not quite as prosaic as that, but it's, you know, more or less.
How the other two either play into this or don't at all. It's kind of, they don't touch it in any way.
They really don't. I mean, it's partly because Jeff was writing the trilogy. He was still actually writing it while I was writing the screenplay for the first. But it's not just that. I mean, that's just sort of factually the state of affairs. But it's also because I don't want to work on franchises. I have no judgment for people who do. It's a completely personal position, and it doesn't stem from anything about the nature of franchises or sequels or anything like that. It's because at the end of a 3-year process, I know of myself already, I will not want to work on it again. That's it.
Thank you.